Cosmic Inspector's Log. Case 07. Status. Closed. The company sent me to stop a fraud. Somebody had spent 7 years buying tickets for a dead man. I closed the case by certifying that the seat was, in fact, occupied. I want that on the record exactly as it happened, because this is the only case I have ever closed by agreeing with the ghost story. The Verity is a night ferry. One route out and back across the same dark stretch of space between 2 ports for 30 years. She is old, slow, and unprofitable, and the line had finally signed her death warrant. 6 days to the breaker's yard. Before a ship dies, the accountants go through her pockets, and in the Verity's pockets an accountant found this. For 7 years, crossing after crossing, a ticket had been purchased for seat 14C. Same seat, same name, paid in full every time. The name belonged to a man who died aboard the Verity 7 years ago. The company smelled fraud. Fraud is a word that involves my office. So they sent me. There was one more page in the folder from the final revenue crossing, a week earlier. A complaint. The passenger in 14B, a young woman on her first flight, reported that during the night somebody held her hand. The cabin camera shows her sleeping alone beside an empty seat. The seat's own systems show something else. Occupied, belt fastened, all night. So, a ticket bought in the name of no one living, a seat empty to every camera and occupied to every sensor, and a hand in the dark that nobody owns. I took the case, and I went down to the dock. The paper first, as always. The ticket money came from an account kept in the dead man's own name, alive on the books, topped up every month from a widow's pension. His widow, which turned a fraud into a question. Fraud takes something from somebody. She had spent 7 years paying full fare for a seat nobody could sit in. What was she buying? Then the logs. I pulled 7 years of them and laid 2 stacks side by side, the passenger lists and the seat status records. The ticket was there for every crossing, the occupancy was not. Seat 14C reported a passenger only on the nights the ship carried children. I mention this now because it is the key to the whole case. At the time, I only underlined it. The Verity herself sat at the dock on standby power, half her lights out, waiting for the yard. The chief steward showed me the cabin, 30 years aboard, most of them on this run. His answers were short and correct. I asked whether he had ever noticed anything odd around 14C. No, sir, he said. A man who answers that question without asking why that seat has been waiting years for somebody to ask it. Seat 14C is the last row, aft, hard against the bulkhead door of the stern section. Nothing to look at. A worn armrest. And on the bulkhead beside it, a small brass plate, polished brighter than anything else on that old ship. A name, Thomas Ryle, ship's systems engineer, and one line beneath it. He held the door. 7 years ago on a night crossing, a seal failed at the stern airlock. Decompression in the aft section, which on the Verity holds the family berths. The automatic bulkhead jammed a hand's width from closed. Rayler reached the manual crank on the wrong side of the door and held it. The evacuation took 90 seconds. The engineering report states in plain print that the door could not have held that long. It held that long. Every berth cleared, he did not. Now the detail that the file buries on page 40 and the whole case stands on. Ryle carried a maintenance implant. The line was trialing direct neural interface for its engineers, hands inside the machine, so to speak. That night, he was linked into the ship, running diagnostics when the seal failed. He died with the channel open. I will be careful here because my report had to be careful. The ship did not record his mind. There is no such machine, whatever the feeds promise. What stayed in the buffers was smaller than a mind and stranger. The last thing he was doing, still running. An imperative. Seal the aft, count the children, keep them calm. It never received the signal to stop, so it did not stop. 7 years, it has no body, so it uses the only one it was ever given, in the ship's own senses. It sets the seat beside the bulkhead to occupied, the way a man takes his post, the seat where he died. And it stands that post only on the nights there are children aboard to watch over. A hypothesis is not a finding. I do not file guesses. So that evening, alone in the docked ship's dark cabin, I ran the only experiment the case allowed. I set a hand terminal on seat 15A 2 rows forward and played a recording. A child crying. Quietly, the way children cry when they are trying to be brave. Then I stood in the aisle and watched the status panel. 11 seconds. Seat 14C occupied. Belt fastened. The reading light above it came on. The way a man switches on a lamp so that a child can see, there is nothing in the dark. I stopped the recording and stood in the silence and said to the empty cabin, feeling like a fool and not caring, "Stand easy, false alarm." The light stayed on another minute. Then it went out, the belt released, and the seat read empty. He had checked anyway. Of course he had checked anyway. And the cameras, for the record, were never lying. There is nothing to film. He has no body. The sensors are his hands. The seat is his post. Cameras are only his eyes. And nobody films their own eyes, which left the hand. The night of the complaint, the young woman in 14B was flying, as it happens, to a funeral. First flight of her life. She cried quietly in the dark, and her pulse climbed. Night ferry seats monitor pulse, an old safety feature, older than the Verity. Nobody remembers it is there. The imperative did what it was built to do with a frightened passenger in the aft rows. It warmed the armrest. It drew her harness snug, the way you steady a child. You will object that she is not a child. 7 years of runtime had widened his definition. Frightened is frightened. She felt a hand. She filed a complaint. I have read it 4 times. It is the gentlest complaint of my career. I went back to the steward with the seat logs in my hand and the plaque fresh in my mind, and he stopped saying, "No, sir." He was the junior steward that night 7 years ago. He carried the children out of the aft cabin 2 at a time under a door that stayed open 90 seconds longer than the report allows. "You are asking why I never reported a malfunction," he said. "I was not keeping a secret, Inspector. I was keeping a watch bill. He never left the ship. Why would I log him absent?" I saw the widow last because by then I knew which questions would be unfair. She is a records clerk at the port. She knows retention rules the way stewards know lifeboats. She learned the truth 3 months after the funeral from a steward who came to the service and stayed after everyone else had gone. And she learned the danger a year later when a deep maintenance cycle purged the ship's passenger caches, and 14C went silent for a month. A purge cycle deletes every inactive profile, but it cannot touch the records of a ticketed passenger. An active fare pins them. She is a records clerk. She read the rule once and understood what a ticket could be. Not a seat, an anchor. "The company once wrote to me," she said, "that the fare was refundable, seeing as the passenger never boards. I wrote back that he boards before everyone and leaves after everyone." They stopped writing. I asked her the question my office required me to ask, why she had done it. "I could not bury him, Inspector," she said. "He is still on shift." The fraud file closed itself. Fraud requires a loss or a lie, and there was neither. She paid full fare. The seat, by the ship's own instruments, was occupied. The company lost nothing except the courage of its convictions. I wrote one line, no loss, no deception, no case, which left the real clock. In 3 days, the Verity's hull would go to plate steel, and her computer cores to the shredder, certified destruction, data security rules. The company was, if anything, eager. A haunted ferry is bad for a brand. A shredded one is a paragraph in an annual report. I cannot file a ghost. I tried the word once in a draft and deleted it while looking over my shoulder. But I can read data security rules as closely as the lawyers who wrote them. The cause held the last running process of a deceased employee, his final work product, and by any honest reading, his personal data. Personal data of the dead is not shredded with the furniture. It has heirs. The company's counsel observed that a running process is not personal data. I asked him whether he would prefer the words undocumented employee, 7 years, unpaid. He withdrew the observation. The cores were released to the widow as next of kin. The company donated the seat as well. 14C, unbolted whole. Companies discover generosity at the exact moment it becomes cheaper than the alternative. The Verity's final run was to the breaker's yard, a crew of 4, no passengers, and 1 inspector who could have gone home and did not. Around 3 in the morning, ship's time, I walked the dark cabin. Every reading light was off, except one. Above 14C, and I sat down in 14B. I'm not a young woman on her first flight, and my pulse is nothing worth monitoring. I sat there anyway, in an empty cabin, on a dying ship, for a while. At the yard, the technicians carried the cores down the ramp to a records clerk from the port, standing very straight beside a ground car. The seat went with them. She signed for her husband the way she signs for archives, carefully, in full. The plaque I unscrewed myself before the cutting crews came aboard. It is the only thing I have ever taken from a case. It says, he held the door. Some doors, it turns out, hold back. Case 07, closed. Seat 14C, occupied. End of recording.